Hello and welcome to the programme. So the Second Ukrainian Defense Hackathon in the field of security and defence is soon coming to an end. Now, during the 5 days of competition, IT specialists and NATO experts have been developing and testing defence programmes. The uniqueness of the National Defence Hackathon is its focus on solving practical and real-life problems. And I'm pleased to say, to talk more about the event itself, we welcome to our studio today Gerard, Elzinga, branch head of the Spectrum and C3 infrastructure branch of the NATO headquarters C3 staff. Hello, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
So, can you tell us a bit more about the purpose of this particular hackathon? Because we have various military experts involved, but perhaps for our audience who are not so familiar with defence and security, what is the main purpose and how are NATO involved in this?
Well, the hackathon is an event where there are some, as you already mentioned, a number of challenges, a number of gaming, because it's effectively a competition, effectively, where a number of challenges are addressed by various teams coming from different parts of the armed forces and security services. They are faced with the same challenge or problem statement, and they are invited to come up with a solution. Some of these challenges are a well-known problem, some of which have been tackled already by NATO or by nations already, but there are also some elements which are new. And what we are trying to achieve is, first of all, to help the various teams from the various elements of the armed forces and security services to tackle the problem in a specific way, addressing the issues there, understanding the problem and coming up with a solution. And also, and that's not that's equally important, is that the teams come up with innovative solutions. There may be issues that we think, with our way of approaching a problem, we come up with a certain solution, but there may definitely be
so it's not like a standard procedure almost, well, you have one problem and you have a step-by-step manual of how to solve it.
No, definitely not. Some of these problems have been existing for quite a few years, and there are ways to solve them. But as technology progresses, there may be new ways of solving and approaching a problem. And that's where this hackathon, or any hackathon in essence, is very useful, because you will be able to use new approaches, new technologies to solve a problem, and making it more efficient to come up with a solution that will help at the end of the day the decision making within the structures, the military structures that we support.
Yeah, and it must be quite interesting for you as well, sorry to interrupt, because I would imagine that the field of defence and security is evolving all the time. It's not a place that is very static, where you can make a manual sort of 10 years ago and still use it today. Perhaps for some aspects you can, but not for all of them. So what sort of problems now, can you give an example of what problems they're trying to solve in a hackathon? What scenario, for example, would they?
For example, there are three challenges, effectively: modeling, a simulation, and modeling, a coding, and a mix of the two. But one of the most, let's say, problems that they now address is, for example, mapping symbols for a common operational picture. So a common operational picture serves to inform commanders in the field, to support their decision making, to achieve situational awareness. Now, of course, it's important that as time progresses, that the maps of each and every commander is reflecting the same situation, because otherwise you're talking different situations, and you're looking at the same situation. But it's important that, for example, when you have, let's say, your situation depicted in one operational picture, that it's the same picture somewhere else. Now, that's not a natural thing that just occurs. You need to have your systems to talk to each other, to understand each other, and this is something which is being done now. Modeling challenge is, for example, how to pass orders from the various layers, between the various layers of the organization. That is being dealt with, but it has also some aspects that they need to take into account. Is, for example, the security needs to be taken into account, the authenticity of those orders, so that at each and every step it can be verified that those are the correct orders that are passed along, and that the reporting back is also properly done. Now, there are certain ways of doing business, but with new technologies, digital signatures, all kinds of new technologies, you could explore, maybe do it more efficiently, and ensure that you get the right orders at the right time to the right people, coming from the right people as well. Yeah. That you're sure that you know what you're doing, what you're supposed to do. And as technology evolves, we now are also looking into emerging technologies. In future hackathons, they may be included in the future challenges as well. And that is a constantly evolving issue, as you already said. Yeah. The way how we approach problems 10 years ago is not the way how we will do it maybe 10 years from now, and not how we do it today. And we learn every time. And that's a good thing also about the hackathon, and I can't emphasize that enough, is that the fact that you have various elements of your defense and security sector involved in this, they will have an opportunity to interact with each other.
Which they might not do anyway.
Which they should do anyway. But that allows them to learn from each other and to ensure interoperability between the various elements of your defense and security sector. Whereas, and that was one of the conclusions of the feasibility study that was conducted in 2014, or that started in 2014, is that there's a lot of stovepiping ongoing. And there's nothing out of the ordinary, that's very common. You have to build trust, and with events like this, where you meet people who are effectively dealing with similar problems, because in each and every element of the defense and security sector, you will be faced with issues regarding situational awareness, for example. You need to have a common operating picture. Now, if you can share each other's knowledge, you know the people on the other side. That will help you to come up with better solutions that are interoperable, and that will build trust among the various elements of your defense and security sector.
Because I can imagine that trust is probably one of the main issues there, because I would imagine that in any country, especially within NATO, secrecy is very important at certain levels, not at every level. But how does a hackathon deal with this? Because I would imagine that some countries, perhaps even Ukraine, we have sort of Russia's war on the doorstep. So how does any country sort of balance security with unity, if you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's always a big question. Everything starts with trust. Of course, it's up to a nation to decide what it will share, up to each and every organizational element within the defense and security sector to decide what it will share. But at least you need to ensure that there is a minimum level of complete trust where you will share the information. And of course, that there will always be information that you're not willing to share. And we have to live with that, and we have to accept that, especially when it's purely nationally sensitive or only applicable to a specific part of an organization, and that you may not even need to share. But especially where you work together with different organizations, different nations, different elements in your defense and security sector, you will definitely need to share a minimum of information in order to ensure that your operations run smoothly, that the information that others need is available to the others. And even though you may not realize that some of the information you hold may be also of interest to others, you should at least make a balanced judgment to share it. That's the minimum in order to effectively and efficiently conduct operations.
I think these hackathons are quite interesting, because I can imagine that in them you and your colleagues are trying to encourage this trust and encourage this unity. But I can imagine that perhaps between different teams, even within one country, there's some sort of competition. One service has to get one up on the other.
Well, let's be honest. Also at this hackathon, there is a prize connected to it.
What's the prize actually?
Well, that will be a surprise for tomorrow.
Okay.
But it's attending the TIDE ACT hackathon next year in Munich. So that's an event where the winners of this hackathon, the Ukrainian teams, can attend and compete again with other teams from other nations, other NATO nations, of course, that brings in a competitive element.
Yes.
So it may also lead to a situation where you deliberately do not share your information, how you tackle a specific challenge, in order to have this competitive advantage, in order to
Well, it's good
get
to
the
have
prize.
that in a way. Otherwise, it encourages people,
exactly,
I would imagine.
Exactly.
I mean, following the NATO summit in Wales back in 2014, I know that members of the alliance, they tried to take a number of steps to help Ukraine. So is it possible, perhaps in a minute or two, to sum up what progress has been made in terms of this C4 commitment? Yeah.
Well, in the C4 Trust Fund, initially a C4 feasibility study was held to determine where what was the best way to help Ukraine on the C4, to improve their C4 capabilities and to improve interoperability with NATO.
Yeah, that's the command, control, communications and computers.
Yes. Yeah. So they will help to, that was the aim, to improve the Ukrainian C4 capabilities and interoperability with NATO. I will not want to exclude that one. 4 projects were identified. Situational awareness, which means to provide Ukraine with capabilities to improve situational awareness, also to share information and to improve that situational awareness. Secure communications, where Ukraine, in the meantime, that project is nearing closure. Where we have provided Ukraine with secure communications equipment and tracking capabilities. A project called Regional Airspace Security Program to have a better view of specifically border crossing air traffic and identifying air incidents, and a knowledge sharing project which supports the hackathon as well. Now, what we've seen already a mentality change in that one, and change goes very slow. I mean, cultural change is difficult to achieve, but we've seen already a change where initially the thought was, well, you have this fund, give us equipment, and it'll be okay. Then we have an improvement of our capabilities. In the meantime, we are at a stage where we already have identified that and also seen that Ukraine now really wants more than just equipment. They also want to learn about the processes that we have in NATO and our best practices and lessons learned. So we've provided quite a few workshops where we share information. We ensure that Ukrainian organizations have access to our experts and they help them out on a regular basis. Also very pragmatically in the development of the Delta system, for example, where NATO support was provided in order to have the interoperability with NATO. So it's gradually changing, but it takes time. That's one thing. Of course, you need to have the right mindset. Now, to get the right mindset, we don't want to impose our views, our ways of doing business on Ukraine. It is Ukraine who has to do it. And we have now established a number of project teams that will address specific topics on their own. They are Ukrainian-led. We support them. And that's the way how we will proceed in the future. And we have some other plans also to increase cooperation with NATO in the C4 front to get them more access to NATO information and how we do business. And at the end of the day, that should help to improve the C4 capabilities of Ukraine, but also the interoperability with NATO and NATO nations.
Yeah, well, that's incredibly interesting, Mr. Elzinga. Thank you very much for coming into our studio and explaining more about the hackathon and sort of NATO's cooperation with Ukraine in general. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That was Gerard Elzinga, branch head of the Spectrum and C3 infrastructure branch of the NATO headquarters C3 staff. Thank you for watching and staying tuned for more here on UATV.